LinkedIn just laid off 875 people, while revenue was up 12%. Let's figure this out. What's going on? Like the whole web is running the same headline today. LinkedIn cuts 5% of its workforce. AI reshapes LinkedIn's strategy. Tech layoffs boom and continue in 2026. The facts are right, but the whole story isn't entirely correct. Just recently, 875 people lost their jobs at LinkedIn. And the company revenue at the same time went up, as I mentioned, by 12%. The CEO, Daniel Shapiro, said that we are positioning the company for future growth and delivering increased impact. These are nice words. If you work in tech, you probably read this memo before already. Not this specific one, but with slightly different words, sent by a different CEO at a slightly different companies, because every single time that happens, it's literally the same memo every single time. And this essay is not really about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is just a symptom. And this is about structural repricing of white collar labor, which has been unfolding since 2022 and which has accelerated to its peak in 2025, and now in 2026 it's reaching a phase most people just refuse to name honestly. I wrote about this phenomenon back in February. I called this thing a corporate collapse, and the thesis behind it was simple. So the era of overstaffed, overpaid and underaccountable corporate employees is coming to an end. Of course, AI is an accelerator to it, but it's not the main trigger. It's mostly because of the math. AI ended up to be a catalyst. And unfortunately, it becomes more and more frequently the cover story behind it. And LinkedIn is basically the cleanest proof. Let me show you why. So between 2020 and 2022, the Federal Reserve held interest rates near zero, which basically means that capital was free. And every company with a growth story could raise money at practically no cost. And what companies do in a context like that? They typically hire, and they did. Boy, they did hire a lot of people. Microsoft is a LinkedIn parent company, added approximately 77,000 people between 2020 and 2022. Read that again. 77,000 people. And Google added around 60K, Meta added 27K, Amazon over 400K. Of course, like mostly they were concentrated around warehouse and logistics, but still there were tens of thousands of people in different corporate roles. And the entire tech industry went on probably the largest hiring binge in its entire history. Headcount growth was basically a feature, it was not a bug. If you were a VP at any of the given companies in 2021, your annual growth plan probably included a line that said, I need to grow my team by 30-40%. And nobody really was pushing back because the money was there, it was free, and the growth was pretty much good. Then in March 2022, what happened? The biggest macro factor, Fed started raising rates. By mid-2023, the federal funds rate was about 5%. The cost of capital went from essentially zero to meaningful overnight. And suddenly every CEO in tech was looking at a payroll that was 30-50% larger than it needed to be. And that's not really an AI story. It's not in any way connected to AI. This is an interest rate story. And the layoffs started in late 2022. It started with Meta cutting off 11,000 people in November 2022. Then Google cut 12,000 people in January 2023. Then Microsoft cut 10,000 people that same month. Those were just corrections. I also called them compressions in my article. And this was not framed as economic uncertainty. It was mostly framed as efficiency. Nobody mentioned the interest rates. Nobody said we overhired because money was free. And stock market even rewarded the cuts. So Meta's stock basically doubled in 2023. And a new template was born. And the template is now in its second iteration. And this time it has a better framing, which is AI. I call this the AI cover story because here's what changed between 2023 and 2026. CEOs discovered that we're restructuring for AI sounds better than we're fixing a staffing mistake we made 3 years ago. And you have to carefully watch the language here, because LinkedIn's memo reads like scaling back investments in some areas to deliver increased impact. Cisco's CEO, Chuck Robbins, announced 4,000 K cuts that same week, posting almost 2 billion in AI revenue. Talked about rebalancing our workforce to align with the AI first strategy. General Motors were cutting 680 workers under the phrase modernizing our technology capabilities. GitLab flattening its management structure into 60 autonomous teams, called it organizational efficiency. All of these companies are profitable, all of them are growing revenue, and none of them are in financial distress. And yet all of them are cutting headcount. Let's dig deeper and figure out why. The honest answer here is that, and no CEO obviously will tell you this, is that they're still correcting for 2021. Microsoft went from roughly 181K employees in 2020 to 221K in 2022. And they've cut approximately 20,000 since then. At least those 20,000 went on public record. And that leaves them at 201K, give or take. It's still 20,000 more people than pre-COVID, before they went on a hiring binge. And they're still net positive. We're cleaning up a 3-year-old hiring mistake. Doesn't really move the stock prices. We're investing in AI while optimizing our workforce really does. Watch what happens to any tech stock after a layoff announcement in 2026. It just basically goes up. It's the same playbook. Not because investors are cruel, because investors understand that these companies were overstuffed and the cuts are returned to an operational reality. AI gives CEO 3 things that they didn't have back in 2023. So first one is the narrative that sounds forward-looking, not backward-correcting. Secondly, it's a legitimate technology shift that they can point to as a justification. And 3, it's a way to frame cuts as an investment, not as a retreat. But is AI genuinely making those roles redundant? Yes, but right now it's at the margins. So AI-powered tools are genuinely reducing the need for certain types of routine work, like basic content creation, first-pass code review, data entry, customer support triage. But the scale of layoffs in 2026, where more than 100,000 people were laid off and the number is growing, far exceeds the scale of actual AI automation by far. Most of these cuts are overhiring corrections wearing what I call an AI costume. Let's zoom in just on this month. In May 2026, look what happened within just a single 2-week time frame. So LinkedIn cut 5% of its workforce, which is 875 jobs. Functions that were cut: global business organizations, sales, marketing, engineering, product. Revenue went 12% up. Narrative, positioning for future growth. Cisco cut 4,000 jobs. AI revenue 1.9 billion and growing. Narrative, rebalancing workforce for AI first strategy. General Motors, 680 workers, basically 10% of the entire department, simultaneously hiring AI skilled replacements. Narrative, modernizing technology capabilities. GitLab, undisclosed number, flattened management into 60 autonomous teams under the narrative organizational efficiency. These 4 announcements share something strikingly similar, and none of them are about survival. These are all profitable, growing companies. The cuts aren't defensive. They are, in fact, offensive. They're saying we can generate the same or more output with fewer people, and we're going to capture that margin to the extent we can. And this is where it gets uncomfortable for anyone who is currently working in tech. Because the question isn't really about, is my company failing? The right way or the right question to ask in that context is, can my company do this without me? When LinkedIn cuts its global business organization, the team that sells LinkedIn Recruiter, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or LinkedIn Ads, it's saying the product is good enough that we don't need as many people to actually sell it. There is a product-led growth underneath. When they cut engineering and product, they're saying AI-augmented teams can ship the same roadmap with fewer bodies. For the year so far, you know that there is a website which is called layoffs.fyi. It tracks over 100K tech jobs that were eliminated in 2026. And the number will almost certainly cross a barrier of 150K by December. And I'm pretty much confident that the majority of those cuts will be companies with steadily growing revenue. So I want to reiterate that again. Rising revenue, falling headcount, and this is not by any way a crisis. This is just a new operating playbook. And LinkedIn's layoffs is instructive because it hit all four core functions. As I've already mentioned, sales were hit, marketing were hit, engineering were hit, product were hit. And that's not really a trim. That's a statement that every layer of how a tech company operates, it affects all of the layers. So if you think about sales, so AI-powered self-serve is replacing human sales teams. LinkedIn's own AI recruiter tools do what a salesperson used to demo. Now, Salesforce Agentforce handles customer interactions. HubSpot AI assistant qualifies leads. Human salesperson isn't disappearing, but the ratio of salespeople to revenue is reducing. Where initially you needed 100 reps to generate 50 million, you now need only 40 basically. Marketing. So for AI generated content, automated campaign optimization, different types of synthetic A/B testing, LinkedIn is cutting marketing spend alongside marketers as well. The events, the sponsorships, the brand campaigns, they're all getting squeezed because LinkedIn has 1 billion members and doesn't need to convince anyone to use their product. So the growth loop is in a way self-sustaining. So marketing becomes a cost center, not a growth engine at that stage. In the engineering part, like AI coding tools like Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, Cursor, Codex, measurably increase in developer productivity. Different public sources like Anthropic claim that up to 90% of their entire coding efforts are being done by Claude Code. OpenAI claimed 95%, Google claimed 50%. Of course, there is a layer of PR underneath it, but still there is a significant improvement in the engineering output. If your engineering work was previously sized for a world where developers write every line manually, you obviously have too many developers, and that's the signal. On the product side, it's an existential threat because AI can now do a lot of things that were typically done by product managers, especially at the discovery phases. It can synthesize user research, it can generate PRDs, it can run competitive analysis, it can prioritize backlogs based on the existing data patterns. The only kind of component that cannot be really replicated at the moment is strategic thinking, but it's for now, of course. But the whole operational layer of product management, the specs, the tickets, the status updates, the stakeholder alignment meetings, that's all shrinking to a significant extent. A PM team of 20 that produces specs and task execution can be a PM team of 8 that provides strategic direction while AI handles the documentation and alignment layer. So if you think about this, affects every function, this affects every layer, and their entire tech company org chart is compressed. Not replaced, because you can't really replace everyone at the moment, but you can definitely compress. You can get the same output with fewer people. And the people who remain need to be dramatically more capable, more autonomous, and more comfortable working alongside AI tools. And again, this is not some type of a bubble that many claim. It's a permanent structural shift. There's a bit of a dark irony in LinkedIn being the company that announced layoffs specifically this week. Because if you think about it, LinkedIn is a platform where professional identity lives. It's where 875 newly laid employees will update their profiles open to work. It's where they will post meaningful and thoughtful reflections about new chapters and exciting new journeys ahead. It's where recruiters will reach out with opportunities using the same AI-powered tools that made some of those recruiters' colleagues redundant. LinkedIn is simultaneously the platform, the marketplace, and the mirror. It hosts the problem, job losses, the solution, job matching, and the narrative, professional optimism, to call it this way. And it just told 5% of its workforce that they're being on the wrong side of this equation. There's also the company that has been the most aggressive in pushing AI skills, badges, and certifications on its platform. LinkedIn Learning has courses on prompt engineering, AI strategy, machine learning fundamentals, and topics like this. The implicit message behind this is that you need to upskill or you will become irrelevant. The explicit message delivered this week: even if you work at a company selling those courses, upskilling might not really save you. So the laid off employees will look for new jobs on LinkedIn. Some of them build the algorithms that now surface their profiles to recruiters. The product they created will process their unemployment. If that doesn't capture the weirdness of the moment, I don't think what really does. So maybe to wrap this up, like, what does it mean for you as the one listening to this? I'm not going to tell you the basic stuff that you've heard 100 times, like go learn AI and become indispensable. I think this advice is obvious and at the same time insufficient. Instead, I think this is what data really suggests. So seniority is not safety anymore. It's not a safety layer anymore, because LinkedIn really cut across all levels. GitLab, as an example that I brought up previously, flattened management. The "I'm too senior to be affected" assumption has become really dangerous. Middle management is the most vulnerable layer. People who exist primarily to coordinate information flow between teams are probably the ones that would be affected the most. AI tools are coordination machines now. If your job is mostly meetings, status updates, and decision routing, I think you're in a blast zone. Revenue generating roles are safer until they are not. So LinkedIn sales cuts show that even the front-facing function, which was traditionally considered untouchable because it directly generates revenue, is now on the table as well. AI-powered self-service and product-led growth are replacing human sales motions at scale. If you're in sales, the question is, do you sell something that requires a human relationship, like complex enterprise deals, for instance, or something that could be sold by a chatbot or a demo video? And I think the answer is obvious, what the outcome would be. The AI augmented worker isn't a buzzword. It has become the new baseline minimum. The people who survive LinkedIn cuts aren't better in some abstract sense. They're the ones whose output couldn't be replicated by a tool. The bar is rising every time, every single quarter. What AI couldn't do 12 months ago, it can do now. What it can do now, I think it's a fair assumption to make it will be able to do in 12 months. And the question isn't, can I use AI? It's, am I producing somewhat that AI plus a less experienced person couldn't really replicate? And company size is also a risk factor. So every company with 10 plus K employees has a bloat, obviously, every single one. And the cuts will continue through 2027 at least. So if you work at a large tech company, don't ask, will there be layoffs? Ask, which round will potentially include me? Smaller companies under 200 people are generally leaner because they never had the free money and the luxury to waste on overhiring. And I think the contrarian stance, the contrarian safety here is be weird. AI kind of excels at pattern matching. It's extraordinary at doing what's been done before and way faster. At the same time, it's terrible at doing what has never been done before. So the roles that are safest are the ones that require novel thinking, cross-domain synthesis, creative risk-taking, and the kind of judgment that comes from experience AI doesn't really have. In a word, it's be weird. Be the person who connects the dots that aren't really obvious. Be the person who challenges consensus and evidence. Be the person who does the thing that cannot be template. Here's the number that I keep thinking about all the time. Like Microsoft laid off 20,000 people and they are now at 200K. Their AI tools, by their own claims, make each employee 20 to 40% more productive. Let's be more conservative and say 15%. If 200K people are each 15% more productive, that's the equivalent of 30K additional employees in output. So Microsoft is effectively operating with the capacity of 231K people, 10,000 more than they had at their peak, while paying 20K less salaries. Now, if you project that forward, as AI tools improve, and they're improving dangerously fast, that 15% can become 25%. Each percentage point of productivity gain is another tranche of employees whose marginal contribution falls below the cost of employing them. So Microsoft doesn't need to fire those people today, but the math is running, and every CFO in tech is running the same spreadsheet, like literally. So the question isn't will more cuts happen? It's how fast will the productivity to headcount gap widen, and when does each company decide to close it? So the 100K jobs lost in 2026 so far, that's the beginning. It's not really the middle, and it's by far not the end. To sum it all up, so on one side you have massive layoffs, which are basically the correction for overhiring, which was caused by rising interest rates and the growing cost of capital, which is basically a course correction or compression. But at the same time, the underlying narrative behind it, which is typically used as a cover story, which is AI is making us more efficient, that's why we need to replace people, is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe right now it doesn't provide the output automation to the extent that the CEO, C-level people in the companies claim, but we're definitely going in the direction where it will. So it's just a question of time. So if you enjoyed this video, please put a like and consider subscribing and follow me for more refreshing and deep takes on tech.